in talking with you, and obviously I know you wear a lot of hats in your role. I'm curious because I read articles that say things of the nature of, you got to know when to say no to certain projects, and there's a power in saying no to certain projects. But I've never been that way. I've always
Yeah.
been the person that said, yes, I'll do that. I'll take on as much as I possibly can just because I see that it's value that I can bring to the organization, or that it's value that I believe that I can get by working on that project. It's a new experience. I get to work with new people and collaborate and learn from. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I know that it sounds like you're similar to me in that vein. You take on whatever it is that they need you for. What's the methodology there? What makes that effective for you, and why do you do it that way?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, this was one of those kind of scenarios where I think a lot of people are finding themselves in COVID, where, gosh, I don't know what the percentage is. A significant percentage of my job was face-to-face contact with youth, children, adults. I had access to our parochial Lutheran schools, our high school, our middle school and elementary school. So I would even go up to, like, for example, lunch once a week. I'm not allowed in the school right now with COVID. And so that was diminished. And then a lot of bulk of my time was then the planning, preparation, and communication and carrying out of those events. So I was sitting there going like, hey, I'm still doing some stuff, but I wasn't doing some stuff. And then I was wrapping kind of in the last stages of my master's degree, and I'd been at this church for 10 years. So I knew when I even started, I said to myself, hey, let's ride this for 10 years and let's see where things go. So I was even kind of in the back of my mind, in the back burner, going, okay, what's the next step for me? And then I'll admit part of it was just even some ignorance of just saying, okay, I've worked with this pastor for 10 years. We've got a great relationship. He came to me and said, this is going to be a significant project. This is going to take a significant amount of your time. Do you want to do this? I felt that there was permission there to say no. But I also said, okay, I've learned enough about myself. I knew the one drawback going into it was I'm a relational person. And when you're watching YouTube videos on how to better use Final Cut Pro and hook up your streaming switch, I go, that's going to be a little less interesting for me. But then I also knew I was going to have to develop a team, and I was going to get a relational connection there. And so I knew, and I'll admit, I'm a guy, I'm a problem solver. So this was like, fence me in, give me the parameters, budget, time, whatever, I'll make it happen. And so that's why I kind of deciphered that situation of just saying, okay, I think there's a window here, there's a niche. This is something that I believe our institution needs to be doing. And maybe a touch arrogantly, I knew I was the most qualified guy to do it. And I knew it wasn't going to be, hey, I was already maxed out. Let's add to this other project. It was like, no, there was this niche. Now, I will also say what was really great about your question, and I don't know if you know this, was the youth ministry aspect.
Right.
Because two of our pastors said, hey, we're going to jump in on this youth ministry thing. And I'll even kind of take it a step further where I go, personally, I kind of pushed back because I said, dude, this is my area. I've been doing this for 10 years. I'm the expert. And so now you're going to come step into my area and take charge of some things. And I'll be the first to tell you, I had some moments where I pushed back and I said, we need to define who's doing what. We need to define what's my role. Because part of me was like, hey, are they taking this from me? Do they not want me to do this anymore? Wasn't the case at all, but that's how I felt. So we've had some meetings, some different things regularly to kind of establish as we were making a lot of how we were doing youth ministry up because of the COVID changes, and then also working through the technology component. And so it helps to have a healthy team where you had good relationships going in. But then that also allowed me to say, hey, what's going on? And they know me. I'm going to pump the brakes and I'm going to push back. And if I got something to say, we're going to say it, because I'd rather have the difficult conversation now than wait 6 months. And now I'm all worked up because of something we didn't resolve back on day 17. And now it's day 400. And I'm in a bad mood for the last year plus on something. And
I
that's
like
great.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a dual-edged message here because if you're in a leadership role, I think it's important that you have a conducive environment where there is a there's an openness. There is an ability to have that candor and that transparency. Because if you highlighted the relationship that you had, that you felt like there was ability to say no, there was some flexibility there, but at the same time, there was also the ability that you had to push back on some elements, or at least to respectfully request that there be a strategy that you're a part of. And I talk to leaders all the time, and I think that is where and obviously I know the people that you're talking about, but at the same time, that's why even if it's a manager that you've had for a day or you've had for 10 years, you've got to make sure that there is a clear expectation, that there is, when it's conveyed, like, hey, we've got this project, we want you to do. And I get asked to do things a lot of times too that are outside of the purview of maybe necessarily my role, but having expressed that I want to get more involved and engaged, that is feedback that my superiors have taken in. And so they've been very diligent with, and to their credit, for looking at ways to incorporate me in other areas, because I see the growth potential that it has for me, but I also see the value that I believe that I can bring. And sometimes you're the best person for a particular thing. And so anytime that you get one of these opportunities to do more, I think it's important that you weigh that against your current slate of projects. You look at, what can I get out of this personally? Is there personal growth? It's not about compensation. It's not about necessarily some of those, am I going to get a promotion? Am I going to get a raise? And I think that's where a lot of people do think. They're like, well, I took on this project and this project and this project, and you didn't promote me. You didn't give me a raise. It's not about that. I think we're always looking at, specifically as leaders, and I talk to a lot of salespeople, you're always looking at kind of what your next role might look like, but you've got to continue to invest in self. And the more, from an experiences perspective, because it makes you more valuable to your organization, more valuable to the people that you work with and you talk with. And I loved what you said about that ability to not only accept the project, but go back and have a hand in what it looks like. And I think that's a fair request, to be able to say, I'll absolutely explore doing this. Let's sit down and figure out really what it looks like, because you don't want to blindly say yes and then have an edict come down and have to execute against something that is not tangible.
Well, and something that I think you probably see, in the people watching this see too, is, and this is I mean this respectfully, but you have a higher up, a manager, a boss, whoever, that has this vision. And in my case, it was like, we want our church to live stream. Well, if you know our context prior to COVID, my boss was not like Mr. Hey, let's live stream. So we had nothing going on there. And so then it switches to, hey, let's live stream. But his role is not to be the cross every T, dot every I, run every logistic. That's my role, to be a logistics guy. So that's where I said, okay, you've got this vision, but do you know what you're asking? And so part of it was R&D on my part to learn more about it myself. Part of it was networking, talking with other places, and then to come back to him and say, okay, this is what it's going to take to do this. This is, part vision. This is part budget of money to get equipment. This is just other things that we want to work through to kind of brand it and make it our own, because you can jump on, on YouTube on a Sunday morning and watch 20 different churches do it 20 different ways. And so how do we get some consistency and make that happen? And that's where I think the relational aspect is good. And you've got to be able to have those meetings and have those sit downs to work through those details. Because sometimes you ask for something, but it's like, well, do you even know what you're asking? Because there can be a lot that goes into it.
Yep. Nope, makes a ton of sense. Great insight.